The year is 1941. Hitler's armies are at the gates of Moscow, yet Stalin's greatest enemy might have been within his own ranks. It's a brutal winter, the Eastern Front a meat grinder, and the Soviet Union teeters on the brink of collapse. At this critical juncture, Joseph Stalin makes a decision that defies military logic. He executes several of his most experienced and capable generals. This wasn't a sudden fit of paranoia. The Great Purge, as it became known, had simmered for years, a chilling systematic elimination of perceived threats to Stalin's absolute power. But to strike at the very heart of his military leadership during the darkest hours of World War II, the stakes were immeasurable. To understand why, we must rewind to the mid-1930s. The Soviet military, the Red Army, was a formidable force, but one with a deeply entrenched history of Tsarist influence, now blended with revolutionary zeal. Stalin, ever suspicious, saw this blend as a potential breeding ground for dissent. His purges began subtly, targeting political opponents, then intellectuals. Soon, the military became a primary focus. High-ranking officers, many with distinguished service records from the Civil War, found themselves under the microscope of the NKVD, Stalin's secret police. The most prominent victim was Marshal Mikhail Tukhachevsky. A brilliant military theorist, often called the Red Napoleon, Tukhachevsky advocated for deep operations and mechanized warfare, ideas that would later prove crucial in defeating the Germans. But his independent thinking was a red flag for Stalin. In June 1937, Tukhachevsky, along with 7 other senior generals, was arrested. The charges were ludicrous: treason, espionage for Nazi Germany, and plotting to overthrow the Soviet government. Under torture, confessions were extracted, paving the way for a swift and brutal trial. The trial was a sham, a macabre theater designed to instill fear and justify the purges. Within days, Tukhachevsky and his co-defendants were executed. This was just the beginning. The floodgates opened, and the Red Army's officer corps was systematically decapitated. Estimates vary, but it's believed that between 30,000 and 35,000 officers were either executed or imprisoned during the Great Purge. This included 3 out of 5 marshals, 13 out of 15 army commanders, 8 out of 9 admirals, and 50 out of 57 corps commanders. The impact on the Red Army was catastrophic. Experience, tactical knowledge, and leadership vanished overnight. The chain of command was shattered, replaced by officers promoted rapidly, often based on loyalty rather than competence, or by those simply lucky enough to survive. When Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, the Red Army was a shadow of its former self. The initial German onslaught was devastating, partly due to superior tactics and equipment, but significantly amplified by the Soviet military's internal disarray. Frontline commanders lacked the initiative and experience to respond effectively. Many were terrified of making decisions that could be misinterpreted as insubordination, leading to their own execution. The fear of Stalin was often more potent than the fear of the Germans. But the enigma remains. Why did Stalin do it? Was it pure paranoia, a pathological need for absolute control, or was there a deeper, more calculated, albeit brutal, logic at play? One theory suggests Stalin genuinely believed in a conspiracy. The vastness of the Soviet Union, combined with his own isolation and the sycophancy of his inner circle, could have fueled his delusions of widespread internal threats, especially from those with independent power bases. Another perspective points to the nature of totalitarian regimes. Dissent, even perceived, cannot be tolerated. The military, with its capacity for organized violence, represents the ultimate threat to a dictator. Eliminating its leadership ensured no one could challenge his authority. Some historians argue that Stalin sought to purify the army of unreliable elements, those who might waver in their loyalty or hold bourgeois tendencies. He wanted an army utterly subservient to the party, and specifically to him. There's also the theory of a preemptive purge. Stalin might have foreseen the coming war with Germany and believed that in such a conflict, any general with a strong personality or popular following could become a rallying point for opposition. Better to eliminate them beforehand. The purges extended beyond just the generals. Their families, their friends, even their subordinates were often caught in the dragnet. This created a climate of terror where suspicion was rampant and self-preservation often meant denouncing others. The sheer scale of the purges left a deep scar on Soviet society and the military. It took years for the Red Army to recover, and it arguably did so only through sheer numerical superiority and the immense sacrifices of its soldiers, rather than superior strategic leadership in the early war years. Remarkably, some of the very officers who had been purged were later released from the gulags and reinstated. Marshal Konstantin Rokossovsky, for instance, imprisoned for 2 years, went on to become one of the most brilliant Soviet commanders of the war. Their return, forced by necessity, highlights the tragic irony of Stalin's actions. He eliminated his best talent, only to desperately recall them when the Soviet Union faced existential threat. The price paid for his paranoia was staggering. The Arctic Enigma, then, is less about a single, clear motive and more about the confluence of a dictator's pathological need for control, the inherent dangers of a totalitarian system, and the devastating impact of fear on military readiness. Stalin did execute his top generals during WWII, but the seeds of that disaster were sown long before the first German tank rolled across the border. It was a self-inflicted wound that nearly cost the Soviet Union its very existence. Next, uncover the secrets behind the Ghost Army, the phantom force that fooled Hitler.